this part. Wait! Don't just stand there, you ape. Give me a hand up. Nope, I'm actually okay. Thank you very much.
Hello, and welcome back to Mix Awards Season Video Series. I'm Tom Kenny with Mix Magazine, and we are here today with the sound team for Deadpool and Wolverine. Disney's two franchises coming together. We're with Ryan Cole, Supervising Sound Editor, Craig Henighan, Supervising Sound Editor, Re-Recording Mixer, and the composer of the film, Rob Simonsen. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. I love the Deadpool films. They are fast-paced, a lot of fun action, a lot of the comic book adventure. But boy, the dialogue is fast-paced, and the action is big. Craig, can you give us an idea of how you set up this sort of action comedy backdrop?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, Deadpool is, the merc with the mouth, the mile a minute, and it's, you're not just supposed to hear the first joke. You need to hear the second and the third and the fourth joke, and in this one, the idea was the precision of the sound effects and the sound design against a really, really dense dialogue track and an amazing score written by Rob kind of just brought a bunch of challenges to us of like just the rhythmical nature of like what sound effects were to do and when they needed to get out of the way. The idea is that a Marvel film has a certain expectation, of size and grandeur and, big action, big music. How do you combine those sort of action traits with a comedy, essentially, right? At the core, Deadpool, is a comedy. And if you don't service those jokes and make sure that everybody in the audience, understands those lines, all those jokes and all those different lines of dialogue, then, you've kind of shot yourself in the foot. So a lot of our work was, thankfully we get on early enough and we get on in an aspect where we can send stuff over to Dean Zimmerman and Shane Reed, our editors, let them listen to stuff in the Avid, let Sean Levy and Ryan Reynolds sort of listen to stuff early. But a big part of it was making sure the dialogue track was, was clean and was to the level that it needed to be. And that's kind of where my cohort here, Ryan Cole, really stepped up and really made it work.
Yeah. Ryan, please. I mean, let's give an idea of what the dialogue is like, because there's got to be multiple sources, there's battles.
Multiple sources, lots of production, lots of ADR, lots of unconventional ADR, which is less unconventional nowadays. Lots of people doing the iPhone lines, but, the microphones are so good, you can kind of get away with it. And also, we have the merc with the mouth who's behind a mask the entire time. So, and I've read things online, they're like, oh, it's entirely ADR. No, it's probably 50-50. There's a lot of production that we're using in this film. I mean, I'd say easily half and half. As far as ADR goes. And the ADR isn't for technical reasons. It's to swap out a new joke or to kind of push a plot point and whatnot. I mean, for Ryan alone, we had 3 full days of ADR where we just watched the movie and either Ryan and the writers and Sean would come up with new jokes that they wanted to try to swap out. And then on the mix stage, we acoustically treated my edit room and put a nice shotgun mic in there. And we recorded over 100 lines with Ryan and I in the room, just knocking them out every time. We'd be watching the screen or a scene and be like, we can do that one better. And we'd run back to my room and do 20 versions of that line and then bring it on back. And Laura would massage it all in. And although as far as massaging goes, Ryan's got such a musical ear that his pitch is so good. They all kind of like dropped in like butter.
Adorn me, Beardo.
FYI, your tailor is a predator, but I love it. Snug, no camel toe, new car smell, and adamantium katanas? You shouldn't have. Go ahead, take it in. And yes, your underwear is getting tighter. That guy knows what I'm talking about.
Oh, in the rhythm, it's changing. He's so fast paced, and these are inside jokes. And Craig, I mean, coming from multiple sources, how does that get balanced in the mix so that it all sounds like they're coming from one place?
It's certainly a challenge. I mean, as Ryan alluded to, Ryan Reynolds was with us for about 7 or 8 days on the final mix, and not just dropping in. He was there at 9 a.m. till we wrapped at night, and so the ability of an actor, producer, the Deadpool guy in the space with you just gave us an ability to sort of look at the film and look at the jokes and sort of look, we're final mixing, right? So we're in a couple weeks. We know we have the movie. Sean and Ryan are happy with the jokes. So the idea is like a short yard game with Ryan Reynolds, right? Like, oh, I can one up this joke. Oh, I can make this better. And as kind of Ryan Cole mentioned, the idea of like, okay, let's just try this one line, but I'm going to give it to you 10 different ways. We had to come up with something, or not myself, but Ryan and Laura Hirschberg had to come up with a real quick workflow to make sure that we could get those ADR lines in, get them in the mix. Laura and I would sit there and just, they would honestly, a lot of them would just sit in right away pretty quickly, but the idea was we needed to get them in the movie because we all might be laughing, right? Like we're all laughing in the room because it's a new joke. We've all heard the older jokes for months and months and months. So for us, maybe this joke is funnier, but is it really funnier for the movie? Is it really the right thing for the movie? So part of the good thing and the dangerous side of this stuff is, you can one up a joke, but you can also break a scene, right? So a lot of times we would put something in, and I mean, more times than not, Ryan Reynolds would up the joke and make it better. But there were things where we're like, well, wait a minute, is this going to work in context? And obviously in film mixing, a lot of times you're working in scene by scene. So you're not seeing you're not like listening to the overall reel, or the overall movie even. So those were the challenges, Tom, we're just like making sure that when we were putting in new jokes that they actually serviced, the right things and they weren't just in there for a laugh,
And these movies have a rhythm to them. I mean, he's the pattern is of the inside jokes and everything. Rob, I'd like that. This is your first Marvel movie, right? I understand. And as the composer, you're wrestling with a couple things. One, you have to hear every word. And two, Sean uses songs as score in a certain part. I mean, it sings "Bye Bye Bye" is a key moment to open, and Madonna's "Like a Prayer" takes a key scene in a battle. You're weaving in and out of this. Can you tell me a little bit about how you approached the film? And what were your first thoughts, and what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I read the script, which was tremendously funny, and thought, these movies, Deadpool's always breaking the fourth wall. Maybe we should break the fourth wall with the score too, and have sounds in there that are from not a musical world necessarily, but from the real world. So I think that's where the idea of cat meows or animal growls or purrs or things like that can be dropped in just to remind us of the irreverence of it and let the score kind of poke out from its own little box. So a rightly timed kitten meow could be like, is that a kitten meow that we just heard? Like, especially right before maybe a badass moment, because I think this movie really trained me on comedy timing chops, because it's all about that. I mean, the dance between what the sound effects are doing, what the dialogue is doing, what the music is doing, it's all to build up to a moment of unexpected laughter. And for that joke to hit in the right way, the music has to be building to a certain thing and then suddenly stop or be pulled out, which is an effect we used a lot, actually, too much initially. And I asked them, can we have maybe one or two less of these hard cuts on the score? Because it's effective. But if you have them in rapid succession, it might the audience is in on the joke. But if it happens that, the music is like building to some kind of emotional moment, like right before the climax, both in volume and as the musical architecture is building towards a resolute chord, you just drop it out, just do a hard cut on the audio altogether on the score file.
Mhm.
Then you're breaking the fourth wall. You're saying, we're not going to try to keep you in this. We're going to try to subvert your expectations and make you laugh. And then the score comes back in. And so there were times where the music itself had to be written like it was kind of falling apart, or it was subverted because of a joke. And then sometimes we're doing that in the mix. But the mechanics of the music from a compositional standpoint, it had to be so finely crafted so that you're following a certain emotional thread only to have that be suddenly averted, whether that's with a song coming in or with a sound effect or with suddenly the score turning on a dime. That happens a lot in the film. And it can, all this stuff, I think we're all working towards that same goal of, are we going to feel emotions now? Is this going to be the kind of thing where we're building emotionally and you like feel like maybe the tears are even coming, but then we're going to hit with a joke? Does the music double down on its seriousness? Does that make the joke funnier? Or, does the music acknowledge it? And so there was a lot of this kind of deeper psychological work that we're all doing to try and make this stuff happen, because it's not just about how fast Ryan's kind of constant jokes are. That is just like this constant, somebody just put an automatic rifle into the hands of an actor. He's just firing at will all the time. And then it became first the job of the editors and then the job of the sound editors to get the timing of all this stuff right. And then ultimately music and sound design to kind of lead us through our paces so that there's this ballet happening, this sound ballet happening, that happens with picture. So this was a real boot camp for that. But, I think we were all on the same page. We kind of knew the assignment. So, we really got to lean in. And I think in a Deadpool film, you get to lean in to this stuff harder than you do in a lot of other films.
Oh, and faster. I mean, it breaks from emotion to comedy to back to heart pull a little bit. You're coming back out of it. It's also a comedy duo. This is like Lewis and Martin or something. I mean, this is Hugh Jackman has his own comic timing, which sort of plays with the rhythm, correct? Right?
He never tries to play comedy is the thing. That's one of the brilliant things about Hugh, is that he's always playing the straight guy, but he's got great comedic timing. So it's like this kind of very disciplined character that he's playing, but his timing is just great, but he's never delivering something comedically.
Yeah.
It's always straight laced.
You mentioned this Deadpool movie that there's an absolute beat by beat interplay of music, effects, and dialogue, perhaps more. I mean, at such a pace. And at the same time, you have this sort of sense of exaggerated realism. We're in a Marvel movie. So when we have a battle or anything like that, we can have, sword hits and everything. Craig, how far can you go with exaggerated realism in a Marvel movie? I mean, how funny can you get? How serious do you have to get?
Yeah, I mean, one, you just try to go to the boundaries, right? You try to sort of, get as far out there as you can with some of the sounds. I mean, we had a lot of fun with the adamantium claws of Logan and an adamantium sword of Deadpool, so during the first Void fight where they, where they first fight, that was a moment that we were able to sort of flex a little bit of like, muscles in terms of frequencies and in terms of sort of metallic ring offs and stuff, and not just using sword clangs and hits, but actually recording, other types of metallic resonances and stuff, and taking things like, if you take like a wooden bat and an aluminum bat, and I'm talking like MLB size, regulation size Louisville Slugger, and you hit them really hard, they can give you certain types of resonances, and then you sort of take them in, manipulate them, maybe pitch them a little bit here and there. Again, you're looking in some of these fights to be as big as you can kind of be, but you're also thinking about frequencies. You're thinking about what the music's doing. You're thinking about the context of the story, which is always the most important thing. So if you look at the Void fight and how that sounds, sort of the frequency spectrum in the low end and so other things that we're using there, versus sort of in the minivan fight with Grease, where knowing the Grease song was going to be such a player, Laura and I sort of, when we mixed that, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try to stay here. I'm going to try not to put too much LFE and super low end into the punches. I'm going to try to be a little bit more mid-range, for lack of a better way to describe it. And then Laura could kind of fit the song sort of around that, so you talk about trying to maximize and sort of, level up every single sound effect. I kind of start there, and then it becomes obvious when you kind of get into the scene with the real music and the real ADR, how a scene's supposed to unfold sonically, and we were fortunate to work really early though as well. We did a number of previews. Sean likes to get sounds in early, so I was able to try ideas out, get things going. Some stuff lived for a long, long time, in the Avid. Then we went to a preview process, and then to pre-mixing, and then to final mixing. Sometimes it was great to sort of do that, but then to have Laura Hirschberg with us, who kind of came in at the end, and she has a, so her perspective and focus is a little different sonically, right? She would be looking at a scene with me and being like, okay, well, that's cool. But what is this sound over here doing? And sometimes I'd be like, actually, I don't know. It's been hanging around since temp 1. I don't know, kind of thing. So, I mean, that's kind of why I thought Laura and I had such a great time on the mix on the final, because it was like, again, you have this perspective of like the three of us being in it for such a long time, and then Laura coming in somewhat at a later date, and just having a different sort of idea of like, sonic perception of what a scene could be.
We really are in two environments. We're in a multiverse environment, but we're really either in the void or back in the world. Does the void sound different to you, Rob? Ryan? Is the void a sonically different place?
Certainly from a score standpoint, there are some things that you hear in the void that you don't hear in other places, but it's a little more fluid than that, I think, because it's really more about Cassandra's theme that you're kind of hearing in the void, because she's kind of the dominant character there. So when she comes out of the void, those sounds are coming with her there. So that was just more about giving her a theme than it was really giving the void a different sound world. Yeah.
Right. I mean, one of my scenes, right, if we could do the battle coming out of the void, coming into the battle of the Deadpools, is one of my favorite parts of the movie, where they're coming back to their world. Could you take me through that particular scene? I mean, when we're...
for the Like a Prayer, the oneer, the kind of the one take big fight scene.
Yeah, that to me, I mean, we've just left a huge battle in the void, and then here comes a bunch of Deadpools. Spoiler alert. Here come a bunch of Deadpools. Walk me through that, if you would, because it's a beautiful sound design and music moment.
Well, and it's a great contrast coming out of the void of, like you say, the big scene and the Jimmy Durante, and then we're just in a city street, right? And then all of a sudden, all the Deadpools come out to Rob's great score out of the thing, and then slow-mo cut to Madonna, those guys fighting to Madonna. And that whole scene was shot without sound in it, so everything we put in was brand new. And that's one of those tricky ones where, Sean and Ryan love that song so much. I think Ryan had this idea either for Deadpool 1 or Deadpool 2. He's had this idea brewing for a really long time. And it's almost like a side-scrolling video game, right? Like going the entire time. And we had the Madonna, which had to be the player because that's what Sean and Ryan really want to hear. So we don't want to make it too chaotic with sound effects and screams and deaths and all that. But you do want to hear them, because if you don't hear any of it, then it is just playing like a music video. So we went through, and first thing we did was we got Ryan and Hugh to go through ADR for each of those efforts and whatnot, or grabbing things from production. And then we actually had Loop Group for like 5 or 6 hours just for that scene, over 50 cues, trying to, and this is where you get the exaggerated realism. We're trying to find fun deaths so they're not all just like, ugh. You know, you want to see the guy that gets the sword stabbed in the face or something like. You want it to be something exciting and funny, but you don't necessarily need something for every single guy. And that's where Laura was great. I had to cut every single guy because you never know which one you're not going to want to hear. And then Laura was like, "No, we don't need to hear that one. We don't need to hear that one. Oh yeah, that guy's screaming on the bus. We definitely want to hear that one." And we would push it. You know, we want them to kind of sound a little cartoony or fun, but not, it shouldn't sound Looney Tunes necessarily, because it's also insanely violent. And the cartoonish kind of helps tone the violence down and makes it more fun as well. And Hugh's efforts are fantastic. You know, Ryan's doing some woos and some fun stuff, but Hugh's like got the guttural things and the jumps and whatnot, which makes it really fun.
Hey, Craig, bring it all together for us, because that has a lot going on there at the final mix, but it's wonderful.
Exactly. Certainly in the final mix, for sure. It was, you know, obviously, you know, the Madonna, getting it up and running. The Madonna is like, Laura has to get that set, right? We have to get at least that framed in. And sort of knowing, as Rob sort of like spoke to, like being quiet at the beginning and then the cowl comes over the face. And so there's literally nothing going on sound effects wise until we actually start getting into the fight and you hear the, you know, the stampede of the Deadpoolers. But the trick, one of the tricks was getting the song to sort of like feel like it's moving along. It's doing all the things that it needs to do rhythmically. You're hearing all the different changes. You're hearing the choral things. You're hearing the musical things that definitely Sean definitely wanted to hear. And then it was sort of my job, sound effects wise, to sort of figure out what stabs you needed to hear, what gunshots you needed to hear, what body falls you needed to hear, in combination to what Ryan and Laura were doing on the dialogue side. So again, we would take a pass at it, and then we go away and work on something else for a little while, and then we come back and take another little stab at it, and then we'd play it for Sean, get a few notes, get a few ideas, again go away. I mean, the idea with mixing, you just can't beat it to death, so to speak, right? Like you have to get it working, and then you have to go and do something else to sort of clear your mind and sort of maybe go work on something quieter or another battle scene or whatever. It's just we had the luxury of time, you know, I mean, in context, we had the luxury of time, I think, you know, to sort of work on a scene like that. But again, a scene like that doesn't come together until you have all the pieces. Like we had done previews with that song and everything, but it hadn't had Rob's touches on it yet. It hadn't had his sort of like, oh, let's just speed it up a little bit. Let's do this. So, you know, it was always working, but it really leveled up when we had all the final pieces on the final mix and we're able to sort of sit there and think about like, okay, how do we start this? What effort is Ryan going to play? Okay, if that effort's going to be on that beat, I'm going to offset the stab maybe a frame or two later, or the gunshot a little frame or two earlier, to sort of give it, again, to give it this sort of like natural, like pattern all the way through into the bus. And then obviously the final triumph sort of burst out, the giant chorus. And then, you know, you speak to, you know, sort of the Buster Keaton or the Charlie Chaplin, like, you know, you have Deadpool and he comes over and he smacks, you know, and he smacks the ground and then things cut out. That's classic Deadpool to me. You have all these different elements and then bam, and then you're open for a joke. Oh, I blew it, you know, kind of thing. So
I do want to address the Time Ripper, because it's one of the inside jokes that they're playing with. The Marvel Universe plays with time a little loosely. And we come to the end and we're building up. We've seen a picture of this machine, and then Cassandra puts her arms in, and we have matter and antimatter devices. We have electrical arcs. We have explosions. Quickly, Ryan, you start. Take us through that scene, and then where does music come in? Ryan, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's two guys holding hands, and it becomes their like friendship is kind of what saves the world, right? Like them finally working together, and it's a lot of them grunting and groaning and holding and screams. And we actually did some places with Hugh's scream to kind of match into Rob's score, so that so it didn't rub the wrong way. Because in Hugh's musical, so he was able to do that sort of thing. And then we get to these. Which I don't even know if, they weren't always there, but we added these flashbacks, which kind of broke it up really, really nicely. You got Hugh's side and you got Ryan's side of it, and it kind of merges the two really, really well together, I think. And then, underneath on top of all that, we've got the Time Ripper exploding, and then Rob's score beautifully coming in with the choir.
Yeah. Rob, where do you even find a place in a scene with matter and antimatter devices exploding? Where's your place?
Well, at the board turning down the fader on the sound effects.
Exactly. I'd come back from a coffee, be like, wait, what? What's going on?
But that's what's great about the scene. It's great because it could be this giant exploding, the loudest scene ever, and it's not, and it's Rob's music, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was the real trick in a lot of moments in this film. That one especially, which is, what is the pressure of the ticking clock that we need to feel, and what's giving us the emotional context? What's the emotional thread? And I'm really proud of how we balance those things. There's a lot, the music, once we're in the heads of the characters, the world as you would want kind of fades away. And then we're hearing dialogue with reverb and things floating around, and the score's just kind of holding us. Before then, it's before that moment, score is up to 10, sound effects are up to 10. And then I think it kind of all started with the editors going from, this is going to be a real world feat that they're going to achieve, to like, no, the feat is actually something internal that they have to overcome. They got to like find their way to some power in themselves to like get through. And so it just kind of becomes this like metaphor. And so at that point, everything kind of gets, sucked away, and we're really quiet. That's of course after the suit explodes, and then there's a lot of minefields in that moment, because the timing of that from a musical standpoint, again, it's that moment where you need to feel like something is going to happen. The music is telling you something's going to happen. The cut, we're seeing the ticking clock, it's countdown. He's reaching. Are they going to make it? And then suddenly Wolverine's hand comes in, Deadpool whips around, and it's like at that moment you would think the cue would just explode, but instead Madonna explodes, right? And we worked on that little 5-second handoff for days, just, moving things even picture wise, and just getting so that the curvature of like what's rising, what's getting pulled out, what's getting pushed forward, because it is a clusterfuck. And in the end, you've got to make decisions, because there's just the economy. It can't just be brown with all the colors. So I think, Laura really did a great job. And everybody did a great job of just trying to thread that needle for maximum impact on all of that.
So, Craig, in a situation like that, sometimes you have to know what to pull away, right? I mean, rather than what to add.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that was that scene specifically. Rob was right with us on the console, and so it was Laura, Rob, and myself. And we would try it different ways. And quite obviously, for me in the sound effects world, you want to be able to maybe texturally hear something, but it doesn't need to be the forefront. Nobody needs to hear another explosion in a scene like that. It's just not, it's kind of boring, to be perfectly honest. And part of my job, even though I'm a supervising editor and sound effects is my jam, when I'm mixing, I'm the first person to start pulling sound effects out or rolling the top end out of sound effects. So you'll feel them, but they're sort of out of the way. I mean, come on, you got Rob who recorded a score at Abbey Road, and you have You have choral stuff from London, but you also have South Central LA gospel choir stuff. I mean, you come on, man. You know what I mean? Like your taste becomes like, this is what needs to be the level up, and maybe a taste of a sound effect there or on a cut or a transition. But, it was really a team effort to make sure that that sequence really got to the level that it ended up being, because if you look at it a certain aspect, you're like, it's two guys holding hands in a machine that's about to explode. So but our challenge was musically and sonically how to take the audience on that leveled up journey of like these guys really believing in sort of their unity and friendship.
And then they come out of the Time Ripper. They're sitting on a park bench, and Wolverine walks away, and they're not a team. Which ends with the joke. Thank you, gentlemen. It was a wonderful couple hours of movie right there. I do love the Deadpool things, and fantastic job. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Craig. Thank you to our audience and everybody.